Hello and welcome to my Dark Souls lore series. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and while I think lore on Dark Souls is pretty much fully covered by this point, I still think you guys can enjoy my take on things. I will try to address some bigger questions of Dark Souls in my videos, questions that might not have any answers to them, but are things to wonder about. So yes, do try to enjoy. This is my first lore video, so I'm sorry about the rather crude and straightforward way of explaining things. In this video I will try to elaborate what exactly is Lordran. This, in my opinion, is one of the hardest questions to answer in the whole Souls series, mostly because much of the lore surrounding the world of Dark Souls is pure speculations. As such, you should also understand that the conclusion will be based on these speculations and will not be a fact by any means.
Thus began the Age of Fire.
Lordran is a kingdom in the world of Dark Souls, or so it would seem at least. Note how I said a kingdom and not the kingdom. To specify, a kingdom is an area of which is ruled by a king or a queen, and a kingdom can have its own main capital, other cities and towns. It is an area that the king has redeemed or conquered for himself. So it would be weird for us to say that Lordran is the kingdom, when in fact we know that there are a variety of other areas and even continents outside of Lordran. We as a player even start in one of these areas. There is a very simple fact that reveals to us that there has to be other kingdoms out there, and that is the variety of knights roaming Lordran. Many of the enemies and friends we encounter in our travels are actually from outside of Lordran, and because of this and the fact that they are knights implies that they have been granted knighthood by a monarch or other political leader for service to the monarch or country. And this is proven once more with mentions of the Eastern land, which is famous for its delicate but exquisitely crafted katanas, special fortune methods and exotic fighting techniques.
I've heard all about you. I'm Shiva of the East, captain of the brigade.
The reason why I say this is because Lordran is seemingly an elevated plateau far above the ground level. We see this complete area in the intro sequence, and yet somehow this little area is called a kingdom. But then again, how large does the area need to be for a king to call it that? You could even speculate it being true that these other areas outside of Lordran could be towns or cities ruled by other monarchs, and the knights we see in Lordran would serve them. The monarchs outside of Lordran could easily have their own agendas, maybe to overthrow Gwyn's rule, and maybe some monarchs idolize the four lords as their gods. But we really don't hear about these other monarchs or rulers outside of Lordran. The only thing we know is that surprisingly many arts, like sorcery and miracles, originated from Lordran, making every single knight and sorcerer devoted follower to the corresponding lord, like Logan to Sith, and like Solaire to Guinevere or Gwyn. But a man is greedy, and with power he can take what he wants. You could say that because the original four lords reside inside Lordran, that it is in fact the kingdom of the world of Dark Souls. Because many outside of Lordran know about it, some even idolizing the deities or lords residing there, some are even sending their carriers of the accursed dark side into Lordran, because Lordran has become the place where undead can roam free. Whatever the fact is, be it a kingdom or the kingdom, we can pretty safely say that Lordran is a physical kingdom in the world of Dark Souls. We know that there is various lands out there, like Astora, Boulder, Karim and Katarina, and the list goes on, and we know this because we encounter these knights who proudly state their origins.
I am Siegmeyer of Katarina.
On top of this we learn that once there were only dragons, and only after the Age of Fire began did man appear.
In the age of ancients, the world was unformed, shrouded by fog. A land of grey crags, arch trees, and everlasting dragons. Then, from the dark, they came and found the souls of lords within the flame.
Man did not rise from the dark, only the lords and their brethren. Where Nido was alone, Gwyn had his knights, and the Witch of Isolde had her daughters of chaos. These were all deities of some sort, not humans, they were lords. But there was one, the further pygmy, who was the first of men, or so we are told. So then what does this mean for Lordran? Lordran was built in the Age of Fire. It was created for the lords and their brethren. Where Anor Londo was the legendary city of gods, it is also the city of Gwyn and Cid the Scaleless. Gwyn had the throne and Cid got the title of Duke and resided on the far side corner in the Duke's archives. Nido returned to the Tomb of the Giants, and Isolde created the lost city of Isolde and started her attempt to recreate the first flame. But the first flame, the Age of Fire, the flame that lit the bonfires, did not subside, and the 30 pygmy finally had enough. His dark soul was powerful, even as powerful as the other Lord souls, yet he had no use for it. It did not create great bolts of lightning, or do fire spells, nor did it spread miasma of death and disease. It was essentially useless, so he shattered it, spreading humanity and darkness from the depths of Wulasil all over the world. The darkness changed people and himself over time into hideous creatures, creatures of darkness. The humanity, the little sprites of dark soul, entered into men, creating a curse so dark that it eventually would force the first flame, the Age of Fire, to subside. Men no longer died, they became undead. At least this was the case for the ones branded with the cursed dark sign. Gradually, over time, they lost their humanity and sanity, becoming more and more hollow. So in order to gain their human form again, men realized that they could use the little fragments of humanity on themselves, granting them life and sanity. But it was not without a cost. Death no longer was possible, and humans were reborn undead over and over and over again, using the first flame as a medium. Thus, the first flame subsided over time, and once the 30 pygmy, now called Manus, the creature of dark, finally saw a glimpse of his wish coming true. As an act of desperation, Gwyn linked the fire to buy some time for a cure to be found, and decided to prolong the Age of Fire. In fact, he was so afraid that Manus could succeed in bringing the Age of Dark that he gave a part of his Lord Souls to the 4 kings, trusted Artorias to go slay Manus, and even create the Black Knights to hunt down the chosen undead. The other deities like Guinevere, the daughter of Gwyn, left Anor Londo spreading their beliefs or religion to men, who were more or less a new and fragile race. When a human died, he lost his only humanity, never to awake again. The reason I explained this was so that you would understand better how humans were born, or at least how they existed. Looking at the areas of Lordran, like Undead Burg, Blighttown, and some of the areas of Undead Paris, you'd see that they were human-made. There were houses, stairs, ladders, switches, and even elevators that were clearly made for humans. And because of the beliefs towards certain deities was spread throughout the world, people came into Lordran to build their settlements, most of it outside of Anor Londo. If we actually look at how Lordran is built, we would understand a little bit more. Lordran, the kingdom of gods is built on top of arch trees that we see in the intro sequence. These trees reach far above the fog and into the clouds, holding most of Lordran in the air. The only area that is not floating but is in fact inside a mountain is the city of Lost Isolate. The Ash Lake, where the arch trees are, is in fact the ground level of the world of Dark Souls. People came into the shores of Ash Lake from all over the world, from Karim, Katarina and so forth, and because of their beliefs to the deities and the scriptures they had with them, they knew that they would need to climb up above the mist, so they searched for the biggest tree they could find, climbed it and entered what we now know as Blighttown, which was a muddy swamp and not a sight a traveler would want to see. So in order to get out of the poisonous swamp, they built their way out of it, using whatever little they had, maybe even parts of their ships and boats, in hopes to find their way out of the dark. And they did, finally rising to the ground levels of where New London Ruins now rests. Humans made it into Lordran and built what we now see, idolizing the deities of old. And perhaps it was the serpent Kingseeker Framd that told the people to build 2 bells, one in the depths of Blighttown, in the domain of Gwyn, and one up above, in the undead parish. For he wanted the Age of Fire to last, so he made a plan to save the future. He knew the inevitable would happen. So he waited for the chosen undead to ring the bells of awakening, to awake Framd from his long dream. In the end, it was not long that the fire faded enough for the undead curse to reach Lordran. In the end, how would you describe Lordran? It is not a different dimension or universe. Undead Asylum is just a faraway place from Lordran, and Lordran sits in the heavens. Lordran is not a kingdom, as a kingdom needs a little more than a city within a city. Lordran is completely isolated from the rest of the world, only Ash Lake being on the ground level holding it all. The so-called kingdom does not reach far, but its beliefs and sorceries do. Like pyromancy, it originated from the witch of Isolate and spread like a flame to the great swamp. But then again, maybe it is a kingdom, but it is not one in its traditional sense. You could say it is a kingdom for the gods, deities and lords, for they do not desire to involve themselves with men. Maybe it was Gwyn that sat on his throne in Anor Londo, the city made by gods who realized that men started to build a city outside of his city, and looked upon his brethren of war, Nido, Isolate, and even Seath, and said, This is my kingdom. Its only city will bow to my law, or it will burn. Its lords will bend to my will, or they will fall. This is my Lordran. Its people will do as I say, or they will die. Its future will be as I decree, or it will end. I've seen what must be done, and nothing will stand in my way. We will be greater, and we will be stronger, no matter what sacrifices we must make. This is my Lordran, and I will see it kindle before I surrender it. Thank you all for watching my very first lore video. It took a little bit longer than I expected, since there was so much I wanted to cover, and on top of that to make everything as believable as possible. Again, I have to state that most of the things I say are based on pure speculations. There is very little information on Lordran overall, and I just had to put the pieces together as best as I could. Again, thank you all. Thank you also for Vaatividya, Epic Name Pro and Silvermont, who were not only my inspirations, but also my source for some lore details. If you think I missed something, feel free to post a comment on your ideas below in the comment section. Also, critique and other questions are welcomed. Other additional information is in the description.